Hi everyone, thank you for being here. So today we will talk about AI agents coordination, and it's like intersection of blockchain, AI, and sometimes humans. So it's wider than crypto, wider than AI itself. And today we have panelists with experience within these ecosystems. So my name is Choly. I'm co-founder and CEO of REP, is a reputation protocol we serve for humans and machines. Um, and I'm personally very excited about this topic. So let's start with introduction of our panelists. Let's start with Evin.
GM, everyone. Thank you so much to Sentient and our hosts for today. And I appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to address what I think is one of the most pressing challenges we face together today as an ecosystem. I am the CEO and co-founder of Billions Network, and we are here on a mission to save the internet in the age of AI. Our technology makes it easy for you to prove who you are, how old you are, things like KYC and more without revealing the underlying data. And now we extend those capabilities to the agents, sub-agents, and swarms that serve you so that we can have accountability, which requires identity in the agentic space.
Hello, everybody. Brian Novell, head of BD at Lagrange Labs, and I'm seeing many familiar faces in the audience. I see many of us are making the rounds to various events today, so nice to be with you all here today. Lagrange, we are a cryptography company, and what we do is we generate zero-knowledge proofs wherever they will be most useful. And certainly these days and going forward, one huge area for that is AI. And what we do is we essentially provide a layer of trust over the top of AI in a non-disruptive but very additive way, actually unlocking the power of AI, especially in important and mission-critical scenarios.
Hey everybody, hi, Muskan. I am head of ecosystem at Vana. What we are building is like a data portability protocol. We are actually launching in like 2 weeks. Data portability as a concept is pretty new. So what exactly building is like an infra of how can you actually like port your data from one app to another app. Like give an example, like I think when we kind of like use like any nutrition app, right? Like that app kind of like asks you a bunch of questions about yourself, who you are, like are you like what kind of preference you have. So how can you actually like build an infrastructure where you kind of like carry your context from with yourself? And how can you actually port your context to all of these apps? That's what like Vana is building. It's like Stripe for personal data. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have like expertise in the different fields such as data, identity, and let's try to define what does it mean AI agent because like it's quite tricky. We have like AI agents in new Google's protocol for commerce. We have AI agents in a like Claude and so on, and we have a lot of AI agents in crypto. So it's like quite different areas. So what do you think? Is it AI agents? It's something with the economical agency, or AI agents can be like just like some code doing like some job for humans? Because like it's quite not easy to understand how we can see a future of AI agents if we cannot define it right now. Yeah. So let's start with Evin.
So I think you hit a very important challenge that is not technical but rather linguistic, where the term agent now is so expansive that we see it used in instances to describe software loops that do not necessarily have non-deterministic or stochastic traits, nor do they have accountability or persistence over time. And so I think for everything outside of a one-shot interaction, our definition of agent needs some tightening, and we will discuss later in this panel. But I think the initial assumptions that we had around the personal butler, these polite assistants, has morphed into swarms of coordinated agencies, but lacking that layer of accountability and persistence.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think that agents basically pick up where the output leaves off, and otherwise when it would be humans taking actions and making decisions based on outputs, whatever comes next, if it's not humans, would probably fall into the category of an agent. So that is a big area that we seek to address, in that when we apply zero-knowledge proofs to proving the correctness and the validity of outputs, in the agentic scenario, what that serves is a very relevant checkpoint in that process, so that autonomous behavior does not just simply follow thereafter without any sort of mitigation or checkpoint, but it can be caught such that if the output was awry in any way or there was various attack vectors that were exploited, it could be red flagged and not have subsequent actions taken autonomously thereafter.
I think kind of like just like simplifying things and like adding on, it's like kind of like a piece of software that can kind of like perform certain actions responsibly, like that's a very important word here, and kind of like just like changes its behavior on the base of on the outputs of that like kind of a certain action. I think that's how I like in simple terms define like agents in my own mind. Yeah.
Thank you. So our topic today is agentic coordination, and let's try to define what's the biggest bottleneck so far, because we just started it so early, and but we already saw like some funny examples. Let's say this Claude and Nodebot. Probably it was like almost millions of agents, and theoretically it can be created by someone like one developer, because we don't have any opportunity to verify opposite opinions. So, and from another hand, like I mentioned, the agentic economy currently fragmented. We have multiple engines in multiple areas. So we just started by it's like completely crazy increasing amount of agents, and it will be easy to create more. Brands will create their own agents, so it's quite fragmented. So what's the biggest bottleneck right now in case of coordination? How we can like interconnect this everything to help? I mean, what's the difference between like humans and agents? Agents can operate a lot of information, data, so we can build, let's say, some protocol for this. So what do you think like current the biggest bottlenecks are not helping us to achieve this agentic future?
So, a phrase that I often repeat, but it is, often extremely relevant, is that accountability requires identity. The ability for agents to recognize one another, to coordinate, especially in, instances where security, physical safety, I'll, throw that over to you next, but, are at stake, is vital. The missing layer of the internet as it was originally built is trust and identity, and that is true of blockchains as well. And so if we want to facilitate orchestration of multi-agent environments, we need not only the ability for those agents to persist usefully and retain memory, but also to be able to recognize one another such that we can set role-based access controls. We can set guardrails and rules about how they interact. And so that's why at Billions Network, one of the memes that we have been bringing into being over the last year and a half or so is KYA. You might know KYC or KYB, these processes by which human beings and institutions can be defined, but KYA, or Know Your Agent, allows agents to be assigned a unique identifier, to have their own data backpack, as it were, so that they can prove who they are acting on behalf of and the traits and qualifications of their controllers. This is especially important in instances of safety shutdown mechanisms, questions that agent deployers and independent developers rarely consider. This is also vital in terms of compliance. As fun as the Moltbook universe of While and Out is, we live in a society and there are rules. So whether it's the protection of children online, the protection of state secrets, or the useful execution of trade secret in practice, we need a greater level of security. And fundamentally, to your point, I think the blocker here is identity.
To answer this question, I want you to imagine that you're a boss, perhaps you're a CEO, and you hire an employee. And then as the days and weeks go on, you notice that this employee is making mistakes. They're making errors. And in fact, you also learn that this employee is on occasion lying to you. And this employee could even be manipulated by others, perhaps nefarious third parties, to do things that undermine you and work against you. Is that an employee that you would want? Is that an employee that you would want to give responsibility to and rely on or trust? Obviously, the answer is no. But the analogy here is that is the current state of AI. AI makes mistakes, it makes errors, it lies to us, and it can be exploited by various attack vectors over time. So you can't trust anything like that, whether it's a human or AI or anything else. So trust is actually the biggest bottleneck in this entire framework. And until we can take those outputs and trust them the same way that we would our most trusted human counterparty that we might love and work with and know, That's the point at which AI needs to get to. Now, will AI get there? Maybe someday, but in the meantime, that's exactly where we as Lagrange apply zero knowledge proofs. That trust is therefore layered onto existing AI, grafted on essentially by being able to prove with definitive mathematical certainty whether or not that AI worked correctly and therefore can be trusted. So that's the bottleneck that we are looking to open up for everybody.
I think just to kind of like recall like what exactly is missing is definitely, as Evin said, like identity, a verifiable reputation, and like a layer of trust. I think if you're kind of like imagining a world where all of these AI agents would go like mainstream, and we see like all of them kind of like just like kind of like operating on their own, we definitely need like a trust layer in between. It's like we kind of like talk about like human evolution, right? Like I think as humans, we have multiple ways to trust each other. Like if it's like a government, if it's like an official work, we sign papers, and that work is not being done, of course, like we kind of like tell that person that, okay, like my work is not done, right? If we kind of like imagine a world where all of these like daily tasks and like payments, all of these kind of like getting like automated by agents, then there's definitely like, we need like a identity plus like a reputation plus like a trust layer for all of this to kind of like function as a system, and which is not, I think, existing today. So yeah.
So to sum up, it's more around trust, identity, and reputation, and scalability of it to be readable by agents. It's interesting because this requires crypto, blockchains, primitives, but the issue is in the last report by Andreessen Horowitz Crypto, it was end of last year, they made a statement that until 2030 we'll have $30 trillion volumes in commerce influenced by AI, mostly agents. And then a few months later, we saw protocol issued by Google, Universal Commerce Protocol, and I saw that it was like there is no crypto at all, no like proofs and so on, and there is not only Google, there is like multiple companies, so there is risk that it will be fragmented and sealed, like locked into ecosystem. And my question is, why you think like the current big companies, they don't use crypto, whereas it's like, I would say, required, because commerce is not only Google, we have multiple companies, so the issue is, let's say, just imagine some company has enough influence and they operate all these commercial agents and they can change some data on backend, and it can like change the ecosystem itself, because it will be not only Google who operating this. So why I think current companies, they don't use blockchain at all in this direction? Or if they use, could you like clarify some examples?
Certainly, I think the challenge of fragmentation that you described is not a pending issue. It is already here, from Google, from I think Shopify, from other e-commerce entities, bringing forth their own payment rails and payment capabilities. And so that's one point that may affect things like our shoe shopping. But if we think sort of more fundamentally to the original sin of the internet, display advertising, where the content that we view is paired with micropayments made to the creators of this ad content, that fundamentally breaks when we introduce agentic browsing. So in the last quarter of last year, 1 in 31 website visits came from an agent or sort of agentic actor, non-human actor, and that is up precipitously from 1 in 200 earlier last year. Now, the reason that you cannot give a credit card to your agent and allow it to browse the web, is that that economic model is simply non-functional, with more than 2% charge, made on these fraction of a cent payments. It does not scale, and so I think incompatibility with existing systems is limiting the plane of play where these commerce protocols are able to operate. But more than that, the compliance requirements and risk management of entities such as Google, I'll pick on them in particular, do not align with the absence of identity for agents. And so, of course, it's very exciting to think about stable coins as machine money, But this may sound obvious, but we cannot facilitate payments at scale if we do not know who we are paying. And so we run this risk regardless of where agents are deployed and the types of payments that are being facilitated. And I see a massive chasm in security and compliance capabilities in the exciting, burgeoning independent developer space where we're deploying agents, putting capital in their wallets, and ceding control of where it is going.
So Google, like any other company, major company, does a lot of very great things. But at the end of the day, they are a for-profit entity who wants to capture as much value as possible. And therefore, they're economically incentivized to have you and me and all of us do, in theory, everything that we do on their platform and extract value at every step of the way that we're willing to give it up. So that's really why they're not adopting this technology. They're not incentivized to do so. And we talk about, the original sin of the internet, for sure, completely agree. But when the internet first came about, there's an amazing story about this. You should all look it up. The person and people that actually came up with the original concept of the internet made an extraordinarily fundamental decision to essentially make it open source. If that was created, imagine if the internet was created by one company and that company owned the overall platform. Imagine how that would look from a centralization standpoint. It's that same concept applied to Google in this scenario.
I think just kind of like adding on, like companies like Google, they want control, they want to iterate faster. And blockchains as a tech, I'll not say it's slow, but again, like I think once you kind of like want to decentralize stuff, it takes time, right? I think like that's a very like a big bottleneck. And it's not about like particularly like agent. I think crypto industry is like not that old. It's been like 10, 15 years. And I think now we are seeing like a lot of like institutions and a lot of like companies, like major companies, like getting like into the space and kind of like understanding like how crypto is important and why blockchain is important. But I think like the only kind of like ideology behind that, we are not able to control action and we cannot like iterate faster. I think that's like a major bottleneck for these companies. But sooner or later, I think if we want agents to kind of like go mainstream, I definitely, I think, imagine like all of these companies sooner or later would have to kind of like adopt like blockchain as a tech, not crypto in particular, but like blockchain as a tech, and also kind of like using it for like payments and stuff. I think specifically in like consensus, we are seeing like a lot of good use cases about like stable coins, prediction markets, and then payments. I think that's where crypto is kind of like trying to find its PMF. But in terms of like agents, this what we just talked about, like identity plus reputation layer, that'll be becoming so much important in like upcoming years. And I think sooner or later these companies will kind of like have to adapt that. So yeah.
Thank you. I think that maybe blockchain also not really ready for this kind of scale. I just reading today announcement of Layer Zero team about their new blockchain, and what I'm being surprised, most of teams in case of ZK been focused on the current like transaction per second, but like let's say engines will require like millions or maybe billions like transactions per second at scale, and I was like surprised because like Layer Zero teams, they say that they spent a lot of time thinking like, okay, which ZK technology we can integrate, and the issue was around the like scalability. But I would love to ask the question around can agentic coordination exist without cryptography at all?
I mean, you can do a lot of things, but then the question is whether or not we should. I think there are limited use cases in which completely open data can facilitate interesting experiments, but I think it is infeasible for business operations, infeasible for instances in which sensitive data is involved, infeasible in which we're trying to facilitate coordination across boundaries, across institutions, across bodies of data. I would say that it is, irresponsible, bordering on dangerous. And, I know that may sound extreme, but we've already seen how the failure to appropriately secure databases related to sensitive human data have caused, massive concern, leading to, more than $1 billion in losses in the United States last year alone. And the estimation is that that's going to exceed $40 billion next year. And so certainly you can, but at what cost?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for there to be no need for privacy and security and cryptography would mean that everybody and every entity's incentives were perfectly aligned with one another, and we know that that does not reflect reality. So, where there are misalignments of interest, in certain situations end up being a zero-sum game, and competition does have a lot of benefits and good things to come from it, et cetera, et cetera. So the theoretical exercise is an interesting one, but in reality it's just not applicable.
Yeah, I think to your question, can they exist? Yes, inside a walled garden, inside like a closed system. But once you kind of like see a world like an open system where all of these like agents are kind of like coordinating like cross-organizational, and I think that's where the system breaks. I think that's where like crypto and like blockchain is definitely needed. I think we go back when like all Ethereum and Bitcoin was invented. We were kind of like sending payments back then. We were transacting. Like why this all was needed, right? Because we all thought, no, like we don't need a middleman. We don't need a bank in between. We want like an open system where like, we as humans are able to kind of like send payments to each other, coordinate with each other. And that's how like this entire industry was started, right? It was all happening. But we all thought that we want to remove this middleman and we want to kind of like do coordinate with each other. I think that's a very similar kind of thesis here, that it can scale, it can happen, but inside like a one walled garden, inside like a one closed system. Once it's kind of like become like more open, definitely I think cryptography and blockchain is needed.
Yeah, thank you. There is also interesting spotlight. Let's say if AI needs to get data from web page, they still uses user agent of humans. User agent is a statement like which browser you use, which device, and so on. So current like AI models, they like faking to be humans to get data. It's like funny. And my question right now like more about the blockchain tech, because like what do you think is still broken? What we need to improve to achieve scalability and more use cases for agentic coordination? Because right now I don't really like that we circled around these like payments, right? This Coinbase X402, because okay, they paying for what? And there is almost no demand, and also the problem is, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, it still requires like signature made by humans. So what do you think currently broken in crypto, what we can improve, what we can develop to be native layer for agentic coordination?
So I think your mention of X402 and Coinbase kind of gets to what you were saying about incentives. So of course, the ability to generate fees, to buy block space, and to facilitate transaction is, well suited to the Coinbase incentives. But also, if we just think from a very fundamental perspective, the only thing I know about you is your public key. The only games we can play together are over-collateralized lending and spending our treasuries. We can throw coins at one another, and that's about it. But if we want to build a product, we want to plan a panel such as this, we need to know more about our counterparties, right? What time zone are you in? What language do you speak? What qualifications or intent do you have? And so without the ability to communicate this information in a verifiable and persistent manner, we put a ceiling on the types of coordination games that we as humans, and certainly the agents who serve us, play. I think this is also a massive challenge in terms of scaling into other use cases when we have an absence of such verifiability. And this is also an existential risk at a global level that we are seeing play out in real time. The World Economic Forum has identified misinformation enhanced by AI as the second most pressing risk to humanity at this time, second only to geopolitical conflict, or geoeconomic conflict, rather. And so the absence of such tooling not only blocks use cases, but it is an existential risk to the internet and humanity as we know it.
I think that we speak with enterprise partners and potential partners all the time, and many of them are in a current stage where they have teams or groups or divisions who are exploring AI and agentic solutions. But as far as actually moving forward to the next step of commercializing it and putting it into production, that's really where many of them are currently blocked. And so much of my time and our conversations are about that next step in this evolutionary process of educating the folks that there is a better way now. We simply cannot just look at AI. There was like stage one is AI is the omnipotent, infallible, omniscient, all-knowing solution to everything. It's going to fix everything. It's going to do everything, period. Then when it gets time for the next stage of the evolution, these companies say, oh, wait a minute. It makes errors. It hallucinates. There's these attack vectors. So we can't actually use it for anything. That's where many of them are blocked right now. And that is where we as Lagrange and some of the other solutions we're talking about here today come in. By providing that trust, it actually provides the best of both worlds. It provides all the benefit that AI promises with the requisite trust, which is 100% trust, nothing short thereof, that these companies, these entities, these institutions really need in order to move forward. You know, because if anyone's ever worked at a large company or anything like a law firm, you certainly can be familiar with the fact that these companies in their big time meetings, they're worried about shareholder perception. They're worried about what the board thinks. They're worried certainly about liability. And these are all the big issues that are holding them back from moving forward full throttle on AI and agentic solutions. But by providing that layer of trust and verification, they can actually now feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, I think just to add on, I think like there are definitely like some smaller technical things which are definitely needed to be solved, which is around gas unpredictability, and then like your private keys handle. Like if we kind of like see a world where all of these agents are kind of acting on their own, we definitely need to solve these like smaller technical things. But on a larger level, I think it's definitely like trust, reputation, and like identity layer in between all of these things. I think once we're able to solve this, like my take is that agents would be able to use blockchains better than humans, to be honest, in some ways, because blockchain still as a tech, we have improved a lot in terms of like infra, we are getting there, but still I cannot like ask my mom to like sign a transaction or send a payment. We're not there yet, right? So I think agents being, in a simple terms, like being a piece of code. And what is blockchain? It's a piece of like smart contract, like it's a piece of code, right? I think like these would be able to understand each other better than humans as well. I think like once we're able to solve these like smaller like issues about like identity and then like all of these like technical issues, agents would be able to use blockchains better. I think especially in terms of like DeFi, where it's still pretty complicated to use that, I think like agents would do a better job in some ways than humans. Yeah.
Thank you. Personally, I'm quite optimistic about blockchains and agents because let's say in the future there will be multiple agents. So, and in my vision, pure agency is not only the agents not requiring human verification or approval, but they're not even connected to, like, let's say, companies owned by humans. I'm trying to explain, let's say, if there is opportunity to turn off internet everywhere, almost not. There is some like infrastructure and so on, but it's quite complicated to turn off it. And the agentic coordination, I think it is a question, the level of like internet for the future, because let's say it's quite risky if someone can change database or change the rules right after. And what do you think, like, when it can be real? And let's talk not only about technology, but also in case of like regulation and the curve of adoption. Because the issue for me right now, in case of blockchains and agents and humans, it's quite complicated, not only for users, but even for enterprise to understand not only the importance, but how to integrate it in an easy way. So, what do you think, like, when we can see at least, like, I don't know, like 100 million agents coordinating every day?
I think we're going to see that within the next 5 years. And when we talk about the blockers or enablers associated, some are related to pure operational risk management. So, for example, of those many institutions that that our colleagues speak with and that we have the opportunity to learn from, that are exploring with agents and agentic workflows in their innovation units, they get blocked at the insurance layer. there does not exist a standard business insurance product that you can buy to protect your business from the outcomes of agentic implementations. In fact, we saw just last year that Air Canada implemented a ChatGPT wrapper that started to make up plane ticket prices that did not exist. And that case went to court, and they were, of course, found liable for the information that they themselves were presenting through this interface to their customers. And I think that's something that many developers do not consider when deploying agents, that you are responsible for everything that it does, even if you are not the one who trained it or who defined that initial model. Furthermore, I think that from a regulatory perspective, you mentioned earlier, when are we going to see progress there? There are already 72 governments around the world defining, iterating upon, and implementing governance and AI safety regulations. Now, the absence of clear understanding, shared standards, and security mechanisms means that we are entering a wildly fragmented environment that is going to either be an interesting enabler in some spaces or a massive blocker in others. So I think what that sort of success metric of 100 million agents at scale interoperating is bottlenecked by is not just a technical problem of scalability, but one of human consensus.
To get to this scenario on a massive scale, two things need to happen. First, there needs to be proper incentivization for these tools and this tooling to be built. And then the second is that it actually has to both work and be perceived as working from the users and those other people affected by it. So on the first part of that, there needs to, again, be proper incentives for these tools and tooling to be created. And it may exist in certain scenarios, but certainly not in others. And that's another thing that's holding back AI adoption in general, and certainly agentic solutions. So for example, I used to work at a law firm. And my law firm, like nearly all law firms, work on a billable hourly model. And when you think about that, and really think about that, law firms tend to make their big time revenue from associates and partners racking up large numbers of billable hours and then billing the clients for those bills. Now, introduce the prospect of AI solutions and agentic workflows in those processes. What happens there in theory? Well, there's efficiency and everything can work faster and better and smarter. But then you don't get the junior associates staying up till 4 in the morning, racking up 100-hour billable weeks, decreasing the bottom line of law firms. So there's a perverse incentive there. Why would a law firm want to be more efficient? It's going to take some leadership and maybe some ultimately undercutting others as far as what they make revenue-wise. But that is just one of countless examples where the introduction of AI and agentic workflows, it's not an automatic no-brainer. And it's certainly not a good thing for adoption in certain scenarios. So ultimately on the macro level, it requires those two different things. And the further point there is on the regulator side. Regulators, for example, we spoke with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission about some of these issues last year. And while they were certainly very open to hearing about it and receptive to discussing it, quite frankly, they and every other agency, at least in the US and I would imagine globally, it's just going to take time. These things require a lot of thought, a lot of education, a lot of understanding, and then, and only then, when it's been tested and proven, will these relatively conservative institutions feel comfortable adopting it and making it be admissible as far as their standards.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like 2 to 3 years away, because what exactly is definitely missing right now is the tools plus also the legal framework. I think once we talk about like AI, like there are a lot of like regulatories and legal framework issues there. And yeah, I think it's definitely like 2 to 3 years away, like when we kind of like actually see all of these system functioning without any kind of like spams or stuff. I think it's definitely like 2 to 3 years away from that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Looks like we have the last question. And I think it should be something personal. What's your personal excitement around this agentic coordination, or like future new opportunities we can open together, or existing problem we can solve? We'll start with mine. I think that we can just like very, very improve the life of like humans and like everyone, because I started to think a lot. My behavior completely changed. I started to treat my data that asset I can reuse. Let's say context. I shared a lot of data with OpenAI. When I want to switch the model, I need to bring context again. So I started to treat it as asset. But I think we'll see a lot of opportunities. Let's say how much money I spent with ZK proofs. I can prove that. Agents can use this data. They can use data about my taste, so I can have like better advertisements and so on and so on. So this is my personal excitement because it can like increase the efficiency and simplicity of my life. What about yours?
I definitely agree with the opportunity to improve and spend less time on menial tasks and invert the labor of search and discoverability to become an instantaneous experience. But overall, what excites me most is the momentum, the speed of rapid iteration and improvement of these technologies, as well as our ability to experiment and iterate, whether it's content, whether it's challenging our own assumptions, or even developing questions for the next panel. And so I'm sure many of you spent the last couple weekends watching in awe and horror as Moltbook produced this rapid iteration before our very eyes with the production of everything from agentic religion and language to novel, mechanisms to generate value. And so just from a spectator perspective, the joy and delight that we can see in these environments, I think, is the best show on TV.
Yeah, we're getting into some very interesting times coming up, and we're probably already there. And I think it's kind of thing that if we can dream it, if we can conceive it, it's going to happen. And the key is that when it does, the benefits and all those amazing things about AI needs to be coupled with guardrails and preventative protections in order for this to all work. Because without those, it's going to get crazy in a bad way as well as a good way.
Yeah, I'm actually personally very excited about like AI agents coordination. I'm actually also like working on the research paper on this topic. So I think what I'm really excited about is that how can they actually automate like a lot of these daily tasks, like book a cab for me, like do all of these trading things. But how can we actually like design a world where all of this can happen without a lot of like spam and like bad stuff happening? I think like this system is like gameable by default. So I'm personally very curious about like how the world is changing with like AI agents, and what kind of like systems we have to design to make that world help us rather than destroying us. So yeah.
Thank you for your insights, real conversations, because like we live in right now in the era where everything can be mimicked and be faked. So it's cool to have like in real life conversations. And thank you for listening to us.
Thank you, everybody.